Mark Twain once said, "The two most important days of your life are the day you were born and then when you find out why." If we look at the second reading, Paul kind of expresses what Twain said today. He said his past life he has forgotten because that encounter he had on the road to Damascus changed his whole life, that made him look forward to the coming of God, to his union with God, to the mission he had to preach the Word of God. His whole life changed at that one moment. In the gospel today, we see a similar thing with the woman brought to Jesus. But Jesus had been teaching in the temple. The scribes and Pharisees were a little jealous. They were fearful because Jesus taught with an authority and people actually listened to him. And they considered themselves to be the keepers of the law, that they were the ones that brought God to the people and brought the people to God, and the way they did it was by the law and all the commands that had been given throughout the ages of Moses. So they determined to test Jesus by catching or bringing this woman they said was caught in adultery. And they said the law, the written word, says she must be stoned. The Romans said the Jews could not kill anybody. The leaders said, "What do we do?" Trying to test Jesus to see if he would go against the Romans. Would he stand by the Mosaic law? What would he do? It was a conundrum that they felt would give them an excuse to bring charges against Jesus, again with the Romans are saying he didn't live the law of Moses. Jesus reacted in a strange way to them. He ignored them. To bend down and doodle on the ground was a typical way in that time and place where people were basically ignoring somebody, like you would be doodling at your desk while you were talking to somebody. And then when they pestered him, he stood up and said, "Anyone without sin, throw the first stone." And no one did. But think about it, what person in any society, even those who thought they had the full law behind them, could step forth and say, "I'm innocent, I am sinless"? And then we see that gradually, in their own shame, one by one, they went away. And Jesus said to the woman, "No one has condemned you. Go and sin no more." And that woman learned that day that life was not the bad things she had done in the past, but the opportunity of what the future gave her. And we see again, we find out at some point in our life, at some time in our life, whether it has been in our past or is it to come, that we learn why we are here, and it is to pursue God, to love God. And that is where we are intended to go. And I think that is the ultimate thing with today's gospel. There are other things too. We could say that the law of Moses that these men were using for their own purposes to test Jesus, to bring things against him. What happened to the witnesses to this so-called adultery? Where was the man who committed adultery? The law didn't say stone the woman. The law said stone both of them. But they only brought the woman. They themselves were being deceptive. So the law of God is not something that was words for Jesus that he was aware of, but he brought a new law, a law that's written in our hearts, a law of love, a law to seek out God, a law that was to forgive, to embrace, not to condemn.